I'm here today with Shane Perkins for another episode of Road to CEO. Shane has been the CEO of Unite Digital for the last 4 years, which is a company that's focused on marketing and communications agencies. So Shane has experience advising, investing, operating, and acquiring marketing agencies. And I'm really excited to have him on the podcast. Shane, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Will. Looking forward to it.
So let's start at the beginning. What is Unite Digital?
It's a marketing services group focused on helping some mid-sized and large clients grow. And we started with I'll break it out a little bit. Unite Digital Holdings is the holding company that owns several marketing firms. We own 3 marketing firms currently, and we bought our first company 2 years ago, approximately. And our focus is making sure that each of these agencies can work together to better serve our clients. We can cross sell services, but that's where it all started. We wanted to be able to better serve clients. We knew that there were marketing firms that focused on several specific solutions, marketing services, usually like 2 or 3 primary services, and then they have some client focuses in terms of industries. And we knew that because of the fragmentation, there isn't a way to put them together and make them work. It's not as easy as it sounds. That's kind of a simplistic, high level view, but that's what we're doing, and it's a lot of fun. It's very challenging, but it's also a lot of fun. So United Digital Holdings is the acquisition company, and then we have our agencies under there.
Okay, so did you start Unite Digital, or were you brought in to run it after it was begun?
I started it. It was literally a thought in my head. So
Very cool.
that's how it all started. But before that, I ran a small business. It was myself and several contractors, and it was for my business it was digital marketing, mostly helping small businesses, local businesses get more traffic to Google. So I was doing search engine optimization. That was my main focus. But it was basically like a job. It was a one man job. I was getting paid probably less than I would be making at a corporate job. And I left my corporate job in 2014, and I was there for about 3 years, from college, 4 years. And then 2014, I left to go try to do this on my own, create the entrepreneurial life. And it was challenging because I didn't even know how to get clients. I didn't know anything about new business. I knew how to talk to people, but I wasn't coming from IT. I was an IT project manager at AutoZone before I left, and that was for about probably 9 months. And I was a communication specialist before that, which basically I just help write messages and do graphic design for 2 years, which
Okay.
it's a slow process, moving through the corporate organization. But until you until you hit a certain threshold in entrepreneurship or with the type of company that you have, like you're probably going to be making more money at another company. So you have to make it through there. So that's kind of how I got to where I am.
So I love that because so basically you were an expert, like you were a practitioner and in marketing, and you set out on your own. You didn't know how to get new clients. I'm assuming you didn't know a whole lot about running a business or being a CEO, but you kind of dove right in.
Yeah, I dove right in. I didn't really know anything. In fact, I didn't really start becoming calling myself a CEO, by formal title until I want to say probably 2019 or 2020. But it was more closer to when we actually bought our first company, which was in 2022. And I just thought of myself as if a plumber calls himself a plumber, but he runs a plumbing business, he's calling himself a plumber. I was calling myself a search engine optimization specialist,
Yeah.
and that's how it went. And then I was trying to find ways for growth. So fast forward about 7 years later, which was I think about 2018. I did everything around marketing. I was like the jack of all trades. Such as somebody in business, it's why you can't scale, because you're trying to do everything all alone, and like you can only do so much. But there's a way for growth, and that's what excited me, is how can I grow the company? How can I not have to manage it? I'm not a manager. I'm a growth guy, and that's what's exciting to me. And I started learning about joint ventures, but problem with joint ventures is that you have to work with partners, and sometimes you don't have the full buy-in and commitment and investment with JVs. And so I started trying to do cross email promotions, promoting to people and helping you sell, both things, and creating opportunity there, because I thought it was kind of exciting. But it didn't really, like, it doesn't really build value for myself,
Mhm.
and like it's hit or miss when you work with the partners. And when I started learning about acquisition, where I was in a position that I could focus on new business and generate a lot of wealth for myself potentially, rather than having a salary, I thought that that was really attractive. And then I had to go figure out how to do that. And so I did figure out how to do that, which I can talk through. But that is what happened in 2018. I started learning about acquisitions, and I started learning about what could my what can my life look like by this as a vehicle, and what could I do? And it just checked all the boxes. And that's why I was decided in 2018 to come from that vision and start executing on it, essentially.
So that was 2018. So that was about 6 years ago that you started learning about acquisitions. Is that the right
Yeah.
time? So then about 2 years later, I believe you started Unite Digital in 2020. Is that about right?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. For 2 years, I had Unite Digital as a concept. I was reaching out to agencies. I had the process started, but I didn't really formalize it and start marketing it and sharing it and putting it on my LinkedIn until, like, I didn't really feel it was official until 2020, because that's when I started to have some deals in place and some companies there to buy, and so that's why I had that there.
Mhm.
And it wasn't specifically official, like we didn't have any revenue until 2022, and we bought our first company and we had 5 million plus in revenue. And we
The
and
5
then
million in revenue was from the company that you
from the
acquired.
company that we bought. Yeah. Yeah. So that's where we started, and we finished out last year at 6. And and so that was the process. But there was a few years of incubation, a few years of failed deals. Like it wasn't that great. Like now looking back there, I could likely compress those 2 or 3 years into 6 months.
Yeah.
And so that's the upside. That's the positive way of looking at it.
Yes, I get it. I mean, I think that's one of the pains of being I think a young entrepreneur is looking back and thinking, wow, I wish I'd learned all that in my first 2 years and the first 2 months. And you know, going back in time, if that were possible, we'd be able to do things very differently.
Yeah, the biggest thing is that I'm kind of stubborn, and it works to my advantage, because I sometimes I don't believe people, even though when they're right, I kind of tend to prove it myself, because I'm like, you say that it's not possible, but I'm going to make it happen. And actually, I make that happen, and I get excited by that. Like, that's exciting to me. But I do, there's becoming CEO, being able to listen to others' advice, your board, your partners, and just sometimes just say, well, do I really know any better? Like, is it worth wasting time to prove them right, wrong, like, just because I have an ego or something, because when you're at the helm, you have, I mean, you for me, nobody was holding me accountable but myself. And yes, our board is there with us, but I'm still running the show. And I think that's the challenge, especially with a younger CEO, is that they may not have, especially if you um, have responsibility for most of the company, and your board is there advising, and they don't have executive decision making. You kind of, if you're not that disciplined or structured, what you're doing could kind of sway, and the advice you take could kind of sway. So I've certainly learned over the past few years to make sure that I listen to people, but that's a big thing. It's a lot of responsibility as a CEO, because your decisions will influence a lot of people. And there's a lot of it. It's crazy because there's so many opinions coming from everywhere. And so that's kind of where I've tried to make my mind a little bit more open.
Yeah. So to go back for a moment, so you talked about starting some joint ventures, and can you just define what you mean when you talk about a joint venture?
Yeah, the joint venture is mostly, we have so I was from a different perspective. There's a few ways of looking at joint ventures. I was looking at joint ventures as a consultant
Hmm.
and putting two companies together to have them create opportunity together. So, they both have two separate assets
So
and
this
you
would
put
be
them
kind of a
together.
merger.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and not even a merger, not a joint venture merger, but more like company A provides, this service, company B provides this service. They have the same audience. Let's put these services together and promote it to each person's list. And then we can each get new clients and we can also, add some more revenue because we can get a revenue share on that too. Like, so that's a joint venture. And so I was trying to put those together, but in the form of email marketing. And I would look at somebody's list and say, hey, you got a big list. I have a really interesting product I think I can bring with you. I think I have some really high converting email copy. And I think when people read this when your list reads this information, they're going to want to buy, and you're going to get a cut of that.
Mhm.
And so those were some of the things that I was trying to do. But when I look at joint ventures now from a CEO's perspective, it's it's looking at how can we provide more to our clients based on what we don't have in house,
Yeah.
and how committed are the partners to fulfilling on that. It's not like these joint ventures, it's not really that exciting for one-offs. You really need somebody as a committed partner. You really need somebody that can ingrain into your culture and your sales team and your ops team. Like you're kind of embedded and intertwined. And that's what I think the real partnership becomes, because that's where you can create most of the opportunity. So that's kind of the perspective I look at with JVs now.
Okay. And so you started that when you were doing your SEO agency, I think, and now and now you've kind of evolved that view as you started Unite Digital and been running it as an agency.
Yeah, yeah, and correct. I started as a consultant trying to do joint venture marketing, basically to,
Yeah.
to cross promote lists, and now I'm trying to join companies together to help them work together and drive growth. And but the problem is that you can pick, unless you have a whole bunch of people supporting you and you can divide and conquer, which is a fair way to do it. If you're limited on your cycles on a day as CEO, a joint venture is kind of like the same amount of time going into joint venture and energy into it can be the same going through an acquisition.
Mhm.
And so because acquisitions is more, it's going to build more value for the company, longer term. And so that's where would prefer to focus time. And that, so I think that while the JVs can be good, depending on your scenario, if you had to pick between the two, an acquisition is also a joint venture. Like you're venturing on an opportunity with another party, and you're trying to bring them in. So it's kind of the same aspect, but you're going to build more value in your company and potentially go on that route.
So I think a lot of people are very interested in acquisitions. Um, what do you think, what, in your experience, what have been the big challenges with completing a successful acquisition?
I can speak from a service company's perspective,
Mhm.
and so from a professional services company. So there's financing challenges, and then there's structuring challenges, and then there's organizational challenges after. And then because you still got to run it and then grow it, et cetera, et cetera. And then um, so there's the culture thing and organization thing. What do you want me to dive into?
I mean, I think that the culture certainly intrigues me a lot. I mean, really anything that would be a challenge about making two companies come together successfully.
Okay, it's probably just good to talk through my process, which is it's the same thing as kind of approaching with new business, trying to talk to new accounts,
Yeah.
the business owners or partners, executives. You want to talk. So I talk to marketing agency owners. I get to know them. I get to know their desires, their visions, their goals, and what they want for themselves, what they want for their team, and they get to know about us. So it's the meet and greet. So that's step one. And
And
step
is
two,
this during the process of when you're deciding to come together and nobody's made
yeah,
a commitment yet?
Yeah. You have to do the dating process. You have to reach out, and there was like, and then you're both like, okay, yeah, we're both interested in the same thing. We're both interested in selling. One wants to buy, and so you have to establish interest first. And because that's going to set the precedent for everything there afterwards. It's kind of setting a frame with how this relationship can operate going forward. And then when you as the CEO, if you're leading that, you understand their interests, and then you understand what their desires are, and then you can structure a deal around that. And then you can put together financing to help support that, and your lawyers and accountants and financing contacts can help do that. And I can talk about financing and all that stuff later,
That'd be great.
but you got to get the deal right. It's just like having help working with a client to help them do business with you. You get the deal right, and um, going into merging, what we do is we look at what they are and what they do and their people, and we do senior team meet and greets, virtually, and then eventually we go do things in person. But when we go to close, uh, we have a process before that, and we can be a lot more regimented a bit with it. But we really just buy the companies and close, and then figure out the organization integration afterwards with an initial plan at that start. But what is likely a better approach if you're more systems oriented is, and you have likely a longer timeline and budget to help facilitate the travel and stuff, which is to really make sure that you have all the teams meet, and then you have a plan. So on day one, you can go execute and start integrating people and cultures and stuff.
Mhm.
It's so that's how we get to closing. When you go afterwards, it comes from the top. It really does. I know it's a phrase that everybody hears, but it really does come from the top, because everybody below will listen to their leader usually. So you have to get each person. You like for us, when we had Millennium, which is our web design company that we bought, they have their established leadership, they have their team. And then we had Zuka Creative, which is, Millennium was about 25 people, and Zuka was about, close to 7 at the time that we purchased. And we kept them separate because we didn't know how the cultures were going to work, how the people were going to work. We kept them separate for several months. In fact, we still have them separate right now, but we started to have them partner and work with each other on opportunities. And it's I think that Zuka's on the West Coast, Millennium's on the East Coast. I didn't see too many conflicts there in the lifestyle of an East Coast or a West Coast person. Where there were the cultural clashes was more like, this company specifically is structured for lean startup type. You can buy a Monday.com and just like Google Drive, and you're ready to go. With your file sharing and project management. And that was Zuka, for example. And then Millennium is a enterprise organization. They work for enterprise clients. Zuka works with more startup oriented or middle market, and the processes and procedures for those big clients, you have to it's more of a scientific approach than the artistic approach on the other side with Zuka. And so that was from a organizational cultural standpoint. That was, we had to find a way to bridge that, and we got over to it. But I think when you try to like shove cultures into another,
Yeah.
it's tough if you don't take a look and understand what each is. So I think the most important thing with the cultural part is just getting a time to assess and understand what each of the cultures are, how each person operates, what they believe, how they deliver on things. Some people's styles may be cultural fits to the intent of the CEO. For example, somebody may be way in the company they buy, they may be way too relaxed for what the CEO wants or what they want to change the company to. Somebody maybe somebody may be stuck in the past. There's so many things, but I think the biggest thing is just getting a really deep assessment of everything, so you can figure out how to take care of it.
Mhm. What are some red flags when you're looking at a company that you're considering acquiring?
So early on, I really was only looking for financial red flags and client red flags, and it was due to um, just not knowing enough. But now the biggest now big red flags when buying companies is not only those, you know, certainly financial, certainly client oriented, but you also want to look for uh, how the business has grown and what the culture is behind that type of business. And if you're, it's more of a soft thing, but if you're, depending on what your goals are as a CEO, like if our goals are to continue to push growth as aggressively as we can, a red flag could be a company that has had people forever and had clients forever. And because then you're going to have to cut, you know, there's a reason they're doing that, because everybody operates to serve that purpose of a long-standing organization that serves those clients, and the speed in which an attitude and approach that they do serves that purpose. But if your purpose is totally different, you're going to have to change that company from the inside out. You're going to have to, and this is not from my experience completely yet, it's partial experience, but also learning from other CEOs
Mhm.
as well, is that you would have to gut a big percentage of the leadership, because it all comes from the top, if you want to transform that company to serve your purpose. So that could be a red flag. You know, that could be you know, for you. So there's clear red flags that your professionals, like your accountants and lawyers, would have, and that your board may have from their experience. But there's also red flags from a purpose standpoint, what your vision is, to pay attention to.
Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah, I think a lot of people wouldn't. I think that'll come as a surprise to some people. You know, just thinking about how having super long-term clients, super long-term team members. I mean, that would at least be something to investigate, see if it's a red flag or not.
Yeah, and the only reason, like, so we bought, you know, Millennium is amazing. You know, we have an amazing team, we have amazing clients, we love working together. But the culture that they've had is a long-standing, you know, long tenure, you know, organization, which is amazing. That's why we wanted to be with the company. And the problem that comes up is that when you try to implement change, you get more resistance than you thought, because what you're doing is you're changing everybody's the way they operated, and the way if you change the way they operate, that could risk what they built. And you don't, you know,
Yeah.
that's something that you don't know if you pull something, what's going to get out of place.
Yeah.
So that's the concern that happens. But it's only a red flag if things like that can only be red flags if it doesn't really match up with your vision, or you don't have if you don't have a willing leadership team that wants to get with the vision. So I think that's so I kind of talk about there's soft things that I think are really important to the CEO, because you're steering the ship in the vision, and then you can have more of the tactical things that the accountants and lawyers can deal with. But when you want everybody going to the same vision and operating, you want to make sure that company will do the same.
So let's change direction for a moment. You know, I think in your role, you must have a good perspective on the marketing industry in general. And I was curious, how do you see the evolution of marketing over the next few years? Obviously, AI has affected some types of marketing. It's poised to affect potentially every aspect of marketing, from creative creation to media planning and buying, website development. You know, in some capacity, I would think AI is going to leave a mark across all those areas. You know, how do you see the industry changing?
Yeah, it's definitely changing everything. I mean, just everything across the world, no matter what sector it is. I think it's changing a lot, but a lot of the things that are mundane right now. And that means that we can use our intelligence a lot more.
Yeah,
I mean, we don't have to do things that are just a pain to deal with. You know, like, why can't computers take care of this right now? You know, I want to focus on the fun stuff. So I like, and you can also accomplish a lot more with AI. You can have a broader reach with AI. You can do it faster. And so I look at all the upside. I'm
yeah,
more of, you know, the usual, like the eternal optimist type thing. I kind of have blinders on to downside, which is a, you know, a blessing and a curse. So um, But AI has been interesting. So we have, I don't get too involved with the delivery of the work, but and also the clients and their needs, because a lot of my focus is the acquisitions and making sure our team has what they need from an infrastructure support standpoint. But what I do see changing is we're definitely using a lot more. We're definitely able to consolidate some roles, and people are able to do more. And so that's what I've seen. I think that companies can lean a lot more aggressively into AI, software to be able to help clients and get the same amount of reach for less people. I think that's really important to assess. I think that they should lean into that hard, so, and we're doing the same thing. I mean, and separate note, consolidation is quite interesting. I can talk about that later, but I wish I could be more specific about AI. What I do hear from others, though, and really I can't be more specific about it just because we don't we don't do too much with it now based on the needs of our clients. And we're using some things like image generation, things like that, but it's not getting exactly what we need.
Mm,
We are um, we're doing video, but I haven't seen our team use AI in the video yet.
mhm.
I think I think the problem is that like we're delivering services that AI can compete against, and it may hurt the margin. It may also, but more importantly, we don't, isn't the quality isn't like spot on,
Right.
specific.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, my view is that it's, we're in version one of AI for the past year or two.
yeah,
Version two, version three, version four, I would assume are going to make leaps, great leaps forward in terms of the quality. But right now, I would agree. I think, we use it as a force multiplier. What can we, get more ideas faster? Can we see more mock-ups faster? Can we have more outlines and more drafts? Can we save time on, like, as you
yeah,
said, the
yes.
mundane activities? In terms of final deliverables, it hasn't really changed a whole lot, except in the number of things that are possible, rather than just, but you're not removing the human element from something that's getting to the client's desk yet.
Yeah, and recent things that I've heard from others in the industry that I talk to is somebody went to Petco, and the next day they heard a commercial on the radio that said their dog's name and said, "Do you want to go get this brand?" It was literally in the radio commercial. It's just crazy. It was
Yeah,
their specific name. Like I didn't even know that they were producing that yet, but I
yeah,
know that that's possible. But I think that was
that's wild.
pretty interesting.
Yeah, I would have to think that there's going to be some pushback on that. I mean, I remember when retargeting ads that followed people around, even if they were impersonal, those were very controversial, and it took a while for people to start to get comfortable with them. Now they're just seen as a fact of life. It's a part of the
Mhm.
media landscape. I think it'll be a little while maybe before people are comfortable seeing voiceovers with their with their own name and their own
Yeah.
dog's name and all that.
It's going to increase. It's really going to increase from a marketing standpoint. It's really going to increase the quality
Yeah.
of experience. I think that that's the most exciting thing. Is look, I mean, companies are trying to sell, so yeah, they want to market it as specifically as possible to that person, and they have it- that's great. But I also think it's gonna, so it's gonna drive revenue for them, but it's also gonna create really great customer experiences and client experiences, and that's what's also really exciting from a marketing perspective. And I think that's, the future is that we're going to be able to provide a lot more scalable and quality and custom, client experiences especially with leaner teams potentially, or just even more impact, especially with paid ads, things like that, and media. I think you can provide more impact for the clients through that. What I personally use as a CEO with AI, because that's probably interesting to talk about, is
Mhm.
is I use, I'm sure a lot of people are using ChatGPT, but I use it quite a bit, and I use it to analyze, to the extent, redacted financials,
Mhm.
and so I can copy and paste financials in on a redacted basis, and also see if it's what kind of points of advisory can it give me versus taking it to my accountants or et cetera. Or there's some
Yeah.
deal concepts that I have. You know, what can it do what can it do for me there? It's a really great uh, it's a really great person to bounce ideas off of, and get your a frame around things, you know, very quickly, so you can act a lot faster. And that's what I found as a CEO. It's been quite helpful, especially with, you know, decks and proposals and things you have to send. You know, it's very helpful in helping put those together and do analysis on things. So I've used it. I've even used it to help put together um, a deck to buy a company, you know, based on the type of profile the company is. And so the same thing can be done if somebody's trying to look at an acquisition or something, they can put in some parameters and then it can help them put a deck together. And especially in, you know, on a tight turnaround, it's quite helpful. Or, you know, the letter of intent that you want to put in, you could create a framework around it and ask you to create a letter of intent, which is you know, a letter with the intent to buy a company, and it has the parameters of the deal within it. It's usually a 1 or 2 pager, a few pages, that signs their exclusivity, that you know, that you can have due diligence with, and that's usually what the lawyers would do.
Hmm.
But you know, what you can do is send it to the lawyers and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Here's the parameters. Can you finalize this? And this way, you don't get tossed around for extra fees on your deal. And you know, I can talk about that part too, fees and stuff. But AI is quite interesting.
Yeah, I'm glad you went down that path. That's always a question I like to ask is how are you using it personally? And I've found that CEOs are more often the way they're using it is they're uploading some type of proprietary data. I do the same thing. And then basically using ChatGPT on their proprietary software or the deal vault the deal, data that you're talking about. But I've also spoken to a CEO who previously, he ran an agency that would do big rebranding projects. And so they would have tons of executive interviews. And then in the past, 3 years ago, he would have gone through all of them and his team would have gone through all of those interviews by hand. Now they have a private chat GPT instance. They upload the transcripts so that it doesn't get into the LLM and the greater network. Who knows, maybe it still does, but they try to keep it out of that, and then that spits back to them really useful outputs that save, on those types of projects it can save 50, 100 hours, it sounds like pretty easily.
Yeah, it's that's another thing is installing private instances. There's probably a really great service for somebody to provide for that.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree. Yeah, I do think if I were starting a business and marketing for the first time today, it would be something probably around ChatGPT or around. I mean, if it was a services business anyway, it would be with. I mean, AI would be baked right into it from day one. A blank sheet of paper would be a huge advantage. I think a lot of us are. We have to figure out how do we use AI on our existing businesses, and it would be, I mean, now's a nice time to have a blank sheet of paper in some ways.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. What's interesting about acquisition is that you can uh, all the people that, at least with the companies we buy, they do want that fresh sheet of paper, but they're kind of stuck in what they have. So with that CEO's help, they can help create a new vision for that sheet of paper that everybody can ultimately transition into. Or you can pick a few different people to help create that new thing, you know, from the company, so it really doesn't disrupt stuff. And so that's what I find super exciting.
Um, love to hear about, we all learn stuff as we run companies. And what are some of the things that you've changed over the years, now that you've had experience at the head of at least two businesses here. Now you've acquired other businesses. What have you learned today that has kind of affected how you run things that you wish you'd known sooner?
For me, because I have a lot of so from a CEO's perspective, for me, because I have a lot of autonomy and because I'm the executive decision maker, um, it's not that I wish I would have known sooner. I think I'd say I wish I would have, I don't really say I wish, but I would have liked to learn more lessons earlier and not know it. Because for me, it's a personal change. Like I have to change myself as a person. I have to change things that I believed. I got to change the stubborn mind because
Mm,
like I want to do it my way. But if I did it other people's way because and listened to that experience and just said, okay, I'm just gonna make this decision that it said. I'm gonna move on instead of try to get the adrenaline from making that happen.
mhm,
And I think I would have moved faster. So that's the biggest thing is not necessarily learning, uh, but probably changing my mindset,
mm,
like a little bit faster. Well, I guess that's the biggest thing I learned, is changing the mindset. And it's not necessarily easy thing because, for the most part, these approaches are hardwired, which is, you have to dewire it. And so I'm really interested in psychology and because in self-work, uh, that's, uh, I'm always doing trainings and things for myself because if I can improve myself, I can improve everything around me. So that's and then you can compress the time frames. The more you learn, the more you work on with self improvement, and you can help impact everything outward. So that is changing how I believed about things, and could probably be the most impactful learning I had.
what kind of self-improvement types of things do you do?
I look at so I look at my personality and what my blockers are, and in the past I had I'll segue into what those personal improvement things are. But it comes with it comes with identifying yourself and finding the thing that will fix that. And
Right.
that's where the improvement things you can focus on could be. And if you're not doing something you need to do and you're just not energized about it, you're I don't know, just putting it off or something, procrastination can be a big thing, especially if you're in a role that you don't have you, if you're in a role where somebody manages you, you can easily be fired.
Mhm.
If you're not, and you run everything as executive decision maker, you don't have that pressure. The problem is if you don't have that pressure, you're not going to move,
Mm,
or you may not move. And what you would have gotten done if you could potentially be fired from a job, you would have gotten that done, but potentially you may not get it done because you did not have the
mm,
threat that is there being kind of leading something without anybody above you. So that's the blessing and the curse of being a CEO, depending on where you're at, because you could have your board fire you, et cetera. But that so for myself, it's more I would tend to push things off that I like was kind of uncomfortable with, and I just wanted to deal with the problem later. And so learning like, well, what like somebody says, Shane, just do it, and I'm like, I hear you, but there's something blocking me here. Can't really explain it. It's a weird thing. And so I want to understand why. So I look into psychology. So that's where some of the self-training, like there's some books that have been helpful to get me to the next step. It's not like I continue to visit them, but there's a book, for example, called I think it's called The Holistic Psychologist, and that helps you understand specific things that are with these certain personality types, and they can be like, oh, I think I have that. So what's kind of the issue behind that person? And then once you recognize a part where you're not performing well like you thought, but you want to perform well in that, if you can, it's kind of like dewiring. If you can dewire a certain belief or point of view that you've had, you can actually input the new belief over time if you keep repeating it. But the biggest thing is that even if you try to, it's kind of like when you try to lose weight or you try to build, let's call it try to lose weight. You're exercising, but you're still eating the bad stuff.
mm,
Like you're probably not gonna make that much progress, or it'll be to a certain extent. But if you cut out the bad thing and do the good thing, then you're gonna go really far with that good thing. It's the same thing with the beliefs and points of view and things like that. You got to cut out and dewire those beliefs. So like for me, for from a psychology standpoint, that I like to understand things about myself and why I believe things and stuff like that, because that was built when you were a kid in your subconscious, and a lot of people kind of go unconsciously through life and never really tackling that. And that's, so there are ways to dewire it, and actually it can happen, it can start to happen within like 5 minutes of doing it, which is ridiculous. You can actually change your whole life's trajectory with dewiring a few beliefs in a few minutes, which is ridiculous.
And
Uh,
is this all from that book? What was it called? Holistic
Holistic
psychology?
psychologist, I think. Yeah, yeah.
Is that the topic of that book?
Kind of, yeah, kind of. I'd have to go back and
Because
look at
this
some.
is striking a real chord with me. I'd love to. I'm gonna pursue this after this call.
Yeah, 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 yeah. It's part of it. It's part of it, but um, part of it's understanding where your deficits are.
Mm.
Once you actually understand it, it's kind of like a trigger.
Yeah.
Like, hey, you're like, you didn't know this, but this is what's stopping. You're like, oh, because once you recognize it, then you can actually find out when to stop doing that and kind of input a new belief or new habit or something. And so you can find it through habit books. You can find it through psychology books. You can find it through some things. This is going to be weird to say, super weird to say, but there is again, I don't follow these people all the time, but they've been very helpful at points of interest for me to help detangle some things along the way, and that kind of go to different people or books or sources to help on the psychology side. But um, I'll have to put the name in the description below. But it's now I'm blanking. Hip, hypnosis. Hypnosis. So I want to say self hypnosis. I was
Oh,
trying to think of the person's name, but I couldn't think of the person. But this is really weird because self hypnosis can be a way to dewire your past beliefs and put in new ones,
hmm.
which is it's so weird to probably listen to this and like, what the heck is this guy talking about?
I mean, you might be right about that because I know it's interesting. I find it fascinating. I don't know who else finds it interesting, but I've talked to a lot of investors and boards, and it's remarkable to me how often they complain that a CEO resists coaching or resists I mean they don't say self-improvement, but that's essentially what they're talking about. And often more than once I've had described to me scenarios where the board has money to pay for coaching. They've allocated it, and the CEO doesn't want to do it and basically just is not cooperative. And it's kind of remarkable to me to hear that, because I would assume that more people would have your attitude, which is, oh wow, we can dewire ourselves and make ourselves better. Let's do that. Can we start now? I can think of a handful of things I wouldn't mind dewiring about myself. So but not everybody has that attitude. And I think, from my perspective, when I'm looking to I've never made an acquisition, in the sense the way that you have. But I've hired a lot of people. And when I'm hiring somebody, a red flag for me in that scenario is somebody that, is going to resist self-improvement, resist change, too set in their beliefs. Because I mean, to me, I think everything is a growth journey. I do think, I like jujitsu, I like exercise, I like learning. It's all growth. You're never going to want, I mean, how much fun would jujitsu be if you're just as good 2 years from now as you were today? Unless you're a world champion, that's that's not going to be that much fun.
Yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned about the board, and you want to pay for CEOs, and they don't
Mm.
want to do it. And getting back to psychology, I'm not a psychology expert, but I think it's fascinating. So uh, maybe their egos probably hurt. They're too prideful. They don't want to seem like they're incapable because they need help. Like they want to show what they got, and they don't want to be questioned. And that just means they're very fragile on the inside, and there's probably some things that need to be corrected from, things that have happened in the past. I know it's like this is getting to like emotional stuff, but like it's actually real, and the subconscious does
Yeah,
it does hold a lot of that, and I think it's kind of being at the top of the food chain for whatever your organization is kind of like it's hard to be sensitive. Like you have to put on, you feel like you have to put on a shield, like you have to have this image, and you have to talk in numbers, you have to be very professional, and like you want to maintain a certain image at that level. It's important. You usually the CEO wants to do that, but one thing to do is to be able to be so self-aware to tap into these emotions, or at least recognize them. You can unlock a lot of things that are interesting. A lot of things you didn't know about yourself. They're probably holding back because they have some beliefs about certain things that they need to let go of.
yeah,
And this is probably, well, if the board is getting so frustrated, there's maybe that's probably hitting performance too, because their beliefs, like maybe it's hitting their
absolutely.
performance. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
it's always accompanied by that. Yeah, that the complaint. I mean, and I've never really thought about it that way, but that I think that's true. That is, it's always whenever I've talked to them, that's been the whole kind of center of the conversation has been performance. And by the way, they won't go through growth. They won't take us up on the coach. So yeah, I mean, I mean, if somebody is hitting it out of the park every single day, then I'm sure that complaint wouldn't come up.
Yeah, yeah, and so they had certain things in their life. Like this doesn't happen overnight, but it can if you know the right steps to do. And that's like what's super exciting, because what changes somebody, like there's like a flick of a moment, something happens, is because their mindset changes, because something happens, it disrupts something that they formerly believed in the past. And that is what can set somebody on the path to growth. And what's probably these uh, it could be a few, going back to a few things. The CEOs, what warrants change is that the CEO's vision may not be big enough,
Yeah.
and therefore they're just going to stay where they're at. And that's why maybe the board's vision isn't big enough, and they want this guy to perform, hit the year over year. But maybe the biggest vision isn't exciting enough, therefore he doesn't need to change.
Yeah.
And so that's a big thing too. So the board can look at what their problems are, and or what the CEO's problems are, and kind of say, well, like what else needs to be fixed. But like when it goes to um, maybe that person needs to be threatened to be fired. Like say, if you don't change this, and by the way, there's actually ways to do it, and we'll change your comp plan. But we need you to change. So we do this. Are you willing to? And if you
Yeah.
are, here's, maybe this is the fire under you to make that happen. But like if they're not performing, they got to change their beliefs.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I come down to. So to close this out, this all goes to which I also like to learn about, psychology of selling and how to sell. And selling is just changing somebody's mind to another point of view. If you can actually, trying to find the best way to word this, so in our wrap up, which is think about when you're sold on something. So it's somebody changing your perspective, and then you're like, oh, like I think I want to do that. So that's really what it is. So any of these CEOs that have problems, if you think about, if somebody's asking me to do something, can I look at it from another point of view that actually excites me? And I think that could be a really big changer for some people that are listening, if they take the time, even go to Chat GPT, is like, the board is asking me to do this. I view it like this. What other ways can I view it? This makes me excited. So like how could I view it from that point of view? And that may actually get that person to perform. It's the
Yeah.
same way as if you
I
try to
agree with
sell somebody and change their perspective, because something triggers with them. They're like, oh wow, I didn't know I could get to that by doing this.
that.
And,
Yeah.
and so you don't really have to change much. You just need to hit what their interests are.
Shane, thank you so much. We're at time, but I would love to have you on another time for another episode of the podcast at some point. I think this was a great discussion, and we're really getting into some good stuff here.
Sounds good, Will.
All right. Well, until next time, thanks for being on Road to CEO. We'll put links to your bio and your companies in the show notes and encourage people who are, good fit for your companies to reach out.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anybody even just wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, it's Shane Perkins, United Digital Holdings. Just happy to talk.
Sounds great. Thanks, Shane.